Poor old Peter, he just can't seem to get it right, can he? In last Sunday's Gospel, we heard him affirming Jesus as the Messiah, the anointed King of Israel, and receiving from Jesus the affirmation that he would be the rock on which Jesus would build his church, and the gates of hell would not prevail against it. Everything seemed to be going so well for Peter, and then we have this Sunday's Gospel, where he takes Jesus aside because Jesus starts to unwrap to the disciples what being the Messiah means in Jesus' understanding of God's kingdom. It means rejection, being handed over, crucified, and only through that rejection, suffering, and death can God's kingdom come. Understandably for Peter, this is too much to bear. To be the Messiah, to be the king, is to be a strong leader, mighty and powerful in battle. The kind of messiahship that Jesus is talking about would have been alien to Peter and contemporary Israel's understanding. That's why Peter takes Jesus aside privately to try and persuade him to give a different narrative about his mystery. After all, this isn't the kind of message that's going to attract disciples, is it? Who wants to follow a leader who's going to end up crucified by the Romans? And Jesus' response to Simon Peter, only minutes after he's affirmed him as the rock, is stinging. Get behind me, Satan. Perhaps part of Jesus' anger at Peter is precisely because Peter is offering him the easy, worldly way out, the glamorous, quick fix way of solution and power. And Jesus knows that in the economy of God's kingdom, it simply doesn't work like that. I wonder if you know that to be true in your own life, that the journey of our lives inevitably involves suffering, disorder, change, and it's only through passing through suffering, disorder, and change that we grow into a new kind of living. All the things we inevitably need to leave behind and lose throughout our lives, perhaps relationships, perhaps jobs, perhaps those we have to let go into death. That all of this is a necessary and inevitable part of how we grow into the image and likeness of God, how we grow into becoming the full expression of God's love, which is what our true humanity is about, and that there's no shortcut for this, and that Jesus knows it better than anyone else. And that's why his next words to those standing around him seem even more likely to alienate potential disciples. If you want to follow me, then you have to be prepared to take up your cross, to embrace it, to recognize not just its inevitability, but also how crucial it is for you as a human being. Quite often when we talk about bearing our cross, it's about something over which we have no choice, physical suffering, loneliness, a painful relationship. But Jesus describes taking up your cross as something we might actively choose to do, which isn't something that you or I are ever likely to do. Because I think what Jesus is doing here is describing the trajectory of human lives lived in full awareness of the cycle of order, where we're prepared to move from a more naive state of innocence to embrace the inevitable disorder and change and growth, because only through that can the eventual resurrection reorder of new life dawn. We don't want to go in search of suffering. Who would? Like Peter, we want to avoid it. But Jesus, in his understanding of his messiahship, his understanding of what it means to be a human being, his understanding of how God's love is made known through the darkness and the dawn, is that it can only break. The dawn can only break in our lives when the darkness has been endured. The great news for me is that in spite of Jesus' harsh words to Peter in today's gospel, Jesus still considers him to be the rock on which he will build his church. And Peter has to take his own journey from his naivete through his own disorder of having to deny Jesus in the darkness of the fire in the courtyard of the high priest's house, through to the new reorder of his own commissioning. Simon, son of John, feed my sheep. It's wonderful for me that Peter's discipleship and ministry mirrors our own, because we get it wrong. We're fallible, we fail, we're frail, and God loves us even more through it, holds us in the midst of it, still has a job for us to do because we're God's beloved children, God's chosen disciples. So this week, however you live, whatever you face. Don't be frightened of your cross, however unendurable it might feel for you. It's that inevitable, necessary part of your life, however painful it is. Through it, the Son of God, his pierced hands and sides, radiant with risen life, waits to embrace you into a new living. Don't be afraid of your own wounds. Don't be afraid of your own frailty and fallibility. They're the badges of your discipleship, and through them you grow into your own likeness, God's image at work in you.